Sydney's apartment market is bleeding. Nearly 1 in 10 units are now selling at a loss. Tonight, the suburbs where owners are trapped with nowhere to go.
If your money is tied to Sydney property, you need to see this first. Here's what nobody is telling you about Sydney's apartment market. Every quarter, Cotality publishes a report called Pain and Gain. It tracks every residential resale in Australia and measures how many sold for less than the owner originally paid. The latest data landed a few weeks ago. I have spent the last month pulling it apart, cross-referencing it against RBA rate decisions, Roy Morgan mortgage stress figures, New South Wales building defect records, and strata levy data that most buyers never see until it is too late. What came out of that work is a picture of Sydney's unit market that no one in the property industry wants to put on camera. This video lays it out in 3 parts. Welcome to Sydney housing collapse. First, the loss corridors. Which Sydney suburbs are recording the highest rates of loss-making unit sales, and why those specific postcodes keep showing up in the data. Second, the trap mechanism. Why owners who are underwater cannot refinance, cannot switch lenders, and in some cases, cannot even sell without bringing a check to settlement. Third, the hidden costs. How strata fees and special levies are quietly devouring whatever equity these owners have left, sometimes to the tune of 6 figures per apartment. And here is the number that anchors all of it. According to Cotality's Pain and Gain report for the first quarter of 2025, 9.9% of all unit resales across Australia, nearly 1 in 10 sold at a loss. Let that land for a moment, because it deserves context. Cotality, the research division formerly known as CoreLogic, tracks every residential resale across Australia. Their Pain and Gain report measures the difference between what an owner originally paid for a property and what they eventually sold it for. And in the first quarter of this year, they found that units made up 62.6% of all loss-making sales nationally. Not houses, units, apartments. The product that an entire generation was told would be their entry point into the property market. The median loss on those sales was $44,000. That is not a rounding error. That is a year of after-tax savings for a household earning the median income. Gone. Absorbed into a market that was supposed to build wealth. Now, translate that to a real life. Take someone like Priya in Zetland. She bought a 2-bedroom apartment off the plan in 2020 for $740,000. She did everything right, saved her deposit, got pre-approval, signed the contract. When settlement came 18 months later, the bank valuation came in $60,000 below her purchase price. She had to find that shortfall in cash or lose her deposit entirely. She found the money, borrowed from family, settled, and now, 5 years later, comparable units in her building are listing for less than what she paid. Her mortgage is higher than her property's current value. She cannot sell without crystallizing a loss she cannot afford. She cannot refinance because no lender will approve a loan that exceeds the property's valuation. Priya is not a statistic. She is a person sitting in an apartment that was supposed to be her first step toward financial security. Instead, it became a locked room. This is market analysis only, not financial advice. Always speak to a qualified professional before making any property decisions. So how did we get here, and which suburbs are bleeding the most? Cotality flagged several inner Sydney suburbs as having notable increases in loss-making unit sales in early 2025. Waterloo, Zetland, Rosebery. If you know Sydney, you know these names. They are the apartment corridors that were supposed to be the future of urban living, transit-connected, amenity-rich, walkable. They were also the suburbs where developers built the most, the fastest, with the least scrutiny. But it is not just the inner city. CoreLogic data shows that Ryde local government area recorded 21.2% of unit resales at a loss. Strathfield, 19.6%. Parramatta, 19.1%. Burwood, 18.8%. These are not fringe suburbs. These are established middle ring areas with train stations, schools, and shopping centers. And roughly 1 in 5 unit sales in each of them is losing money. Now consider the broader market context. According to CoreLogic's December 2025 data, Sydney's unit median price sits at $794,000, up just 1.1% year-on-year. Houses, by contrast, rose 3.2% over the same period to a median of $1.41 million. Units are not just underperforming, they are decoupling from the rest of the market entirely. Take Marcus in Ryde. He bought a one-bedroom apartment in 2019 for $610,000. He recently had it appraised for a potential sale. The agent's estimate came back at $565,000, a loss of $45,000, almost exactly the national median loss that Cotality reported. Marcus pays a mortgage on a property worth less than he owes, and his strata fees went up 17% last year after the building needed waterproofing repairs. Now, here is the counter-argument you will hear. Property is a long-term investment. Markets recover. If Marcus holds for another 5 to 10 years, he will likely come out ahead. And historically, that argument has been true for houses. But units are different. Units compete against new supply in ways houses do not. Every new apartment tower built within a kilometer of Marcus's building pushes his resale value down. And in corridors like Ryde, Parramatta, and Zetland, thousands more units are in the development pipeline right now. Long-term recovery assumes scarcity. In Sydney's unit market, scarcity does not exist. Here is the part of this story that keeps people awake at night. It is not just that some owners are sitting on paper losses. It is that the system will not let them leave. The Reserve Bank of Australia raised the cash rate to 4.35% in May 2026, the third consecutive hike this year. Variable mortgage rates across the major banks now sit between 6.2 and 6.7%. According to CanStar's 2026 analysis, a household earning $120,000 per year can now borrow approximately $150,000 less than the same household could borrow in 2021. Monthly repayments on a $600,000 loan have risen by over $800 compared to just 2 years ago. That is not abstract. That is $800 a month that used to go toward groceries, childcare, savings. It is gone. And for owners who are already stretched, the escape route refinancing to a lower rate with a different lender is blocked. Here is why. Switching lenders requires a new bank valuation, and lenders will not approve a loan that exceeds the current value of the property. If your apartment is worth less than your outstanding mortgage, you cannot refinance. You are locked into whatever rate your current lender offers. According to Compare the Market and the RBA's Financial Stability Review, this mechanism traps borrowers at the worst possible moment when they most need relief. Consider Jen in Waterloo. She bought a 2-bedroom apartment in 2021 at the peak of the market. Her mortgage sits at $680,000. A recent valuation put her apartment at $630,000. She is $50,000 underwater. She called 3 lenders about refinancing. All 3 said the same thing: they cannot lend more than the property is worth. So Jen stays with her current lender at a variable rate of 6.45%, paying $2,100 more per year than she would if she could switch to the most competitive rate on the market. The counter-argument here goes like this. Interest rates are cyclical. When rates come down, borrowing power returns, valuations recover, and the refinancing door reopens. And that is true eventually. But Roy Morgan's data from August 2025 shows that 1.423 million Australians were already at risk of mortgage stress. That is 27.9% of all mortgage holders. 616,000 more than when the rate hiking cycle began in May 2022. And NSW leads the nation with 0.99% of loans in arrears, the highest of any state. These people are not waiting for the cycle to turn. They are drowning now. The trap is not the rate. It is not the valuation. It is the fact that both hit at the same time, and the system offers no exit. Even if you could survive the mortgage, even if you could stomach the paper loss, There is a third force eating into whatever equity remains, and most buyers never see it coming until the levy notice arrives in the mail. Strata fees in Sydney's inner west rose by between 15 and 40% in a single year, according to reports cited by realestate.com.au. Across Sydney more broadly, typical annual strata fees for a two-bedroom apartment now range from $2,000 to $10,000 per year, depending on the building's age, size, and condition. That is not a luxury cost. That is mandatory. You do not get to opt out. But strata fees are predictable. Special levies are not. The NSW Building Commission has documented widespread defects across Sydney's apartment stock, cladding failures, waterproofing breakdowns, structural issues. When these defects need repair, the cost falls on the owners through special levies. And according to analysis by Strata Fee Calculator Australia and reporting on NSW Building Commission data, those levies range from $50,000 to over $1 million per lot. Per lot. That means per apartment. Take Daniel in Mascot. He bought into a building completed in 2018. 2 years after he moved in, the owner's corporation received an engineer's report identifying critical waterproofing defects across the building's podium level and basement car park. The remediation, quote, $14 million across 120 lots. Daniel's share, $116,000. He did not have it. He took out a personal loan. He is now paying a mortgage, strata fees that rose 22% last year, and a personal loan to fix defects in a building he had no role in constructing. The counter-argument from the development industry is that building standards have improved since the reforms following the Opal Tower and Mascot Towers incidents. And that is partially true. The regulatory framework is stronger than it was in 2017. But the buildings constructed during that earlier period still exist. People still live in them, and the defects do not fix themselves. The bill comes due whether the regulations changed or not. It is not the mortgage that breaks people. It is not the interest rate. It is the combination, the mortgage, plus the rate, plus the strata, plus the levy, plus the falling valuation, all hitting at once, in a property that was supposed to be the safe choice. Sydney is not the only city where apartment owners are bleeding. But the scale of the problem here deserves context. Start with Melbourne. According to CoreLogic's Pain and Gain report from December 2024, the City of Melbourne local government area recorded 43.7% of all resales at a loss in the third quarter of that year. 43.7%. Nearly half of everyone who sold a property in that LGA lost money. Sydney has not reached that level yet, but the trajectory in suburbs like Waterloo, Zetland, and Ryde is pointing in the same direction. Melbourne is not a cautionary tale from a different country. It is the same market, 12 months ahead. Now look at Brisbane. Queensland's capital has seen strong price growth over the past 3 years, driven by interstate migration and relative affordability. But even Brisbane's unit market is showing early signs of the same pattern: oversupply in inner-city corridors, particularly in postcodes around Fortitude Valley and South Brisbane, where developer activity surged during the pandemic construction boom. The apartment glut that hit Melbourne first is arriving in Brisbane on a delay. And then there is the international picture. Vancouver's apartment market went through a sustained correction between 2018 and 2022 after years of rapid construction in the downtown core. According to the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, benchmark apartment prices in Greater Vancouver fell approximately 16% from their 2018 peak, before stabilizing a correction driven by oversupply in new-build corridors, tightened lending rules, and a foreign buyer tax that reduced speculative demand. Auckland followed a similar trajectory. Stats NZ data shows Auckland apartment values declined by roughly 18% between late 2021 and mid-2023, with the sharpest falls concentrated in the CBD and fringe suburbs where new high-density construction had been most aggressive. The pattern across all 4 cities is the same. Concentrated high-density construction in narrow corridors, followed by oversupply, followed by price declines sharpest in the newest buildings. Melbourne City LGA at 43.7% loss-making sales. Vancouver, down 16% from peak. Auckland, down 18% from peak. Sydney's loss corridors, Zetland, Waterloo, Parramatta, Ryde, are earlier on that same curve. Sydney is not unique, but it is the most expensive. And that makes the losses larger, the trap harder to escape, and the consequences more severe than anywhere else in the country. So, where does this go from here? Not predictions, possibilities, grounded in the data we have just walked through. Best case. The RBA pauses its hiking cycle in the second half of 2026. Variable rates stabilize near 6%. Borrowing power partially recovers. Some owners who are marginally underwater find their valuations creep back above their loan balances, reopening the refinancing door. Unit prices in loss corridors stabilize but do not recover meaningfully for 3 to 5 years. New supply slows as developers pull back from approvals. This is the best case, and even in this scenario, owners who bought at peak prices in 2019 to 2021 are still sitting on paper losses for years. Recovery is not rescue. Realistic case. Rates remain elevated through 2027. Mortgage stress continues to climb past the 1.5 million mark nationally. Loss-making sales in Sydney's unit corridors increase from 1 in 10 to 1 in 7 as forced sellers enter the market. Owners who simply cannot hold on any longer. Strata costs continue rising at double-digit rates as aging buildings require more maintenance. The gap between house prices and unit prices in Sydney widens further, reinforcing the perception that apartments are not wealth-building assets. This scenario does not require anything unusual to happen. It only requires current trends to continue. Worst case. A recession triggers job losses concentrated in the professional services sector, the demographic most exposed to inner-city unit mortgages. Forced sales spike. Valuations in oversupplied corridors fall 15 to 20% from current levels. Buildings with known defects become effectively unsellable. Lenders tighten serviceability buffers further. The unit market in corridors like Zetland and Parramatta enters a prolonged correction that takes a decade to unwind. The realistic case is the one to plan for. The worst case is the one to prepare against. If you are a current mortgage holder on a Sydney unit, check your loan-to-value ratio now. Not what you think it is, what a current valuation would actually show. If you are above 80%, start building a buffer. Pay ahead where you can. Review your strata minutes for any upcoming special levies. The worst surprises are the ones you could have seen coming. If you are a first homebuyer looking at units in Sydney, do not buy into a building without reading the last 3 years of strata meeting minutes and the most recent building inspection report. Check the development pipeline within 1 kilometre of any apartment you are considering. If 3 more towers are approved nearby, your resale value is at risk before you even move in. If you are a renter, understand that this market turbulence gives you leverage you have not had in years. Landlords under mortgage stress are more likely to negotiate on rent than to risk a vacancy. Know your position. If you are an investor holding a Sydney unit, the data in this video should force a hard conversation with your spreadsheet. Cotality shows that 1 in 10 unit resales nationally are already selling at a loss, and in local government areas like Ryde, that figure is 1 in 5. If your unit sits in a corridor where the development pipeline is still active, every new tower approved within a kilometre is downward pressure on your resale value that does not appear in any rental yield calculation. Factor in strata fee increases of 15 to 40% per year, the figures reported across Sydney's inner west, and your holding costs are rising faster than your rent can follow. Factor in the possibility of a special levy for building defects, which the NSW Building Commission data shows can range from $50,000 to over $1 million per lot, and a single engineer's report can wipe out a decade of capital growth overnight. And understand the refinancing trap. If your property's current valuation sits below your outstanding loan balance, you cannot switch lenders, you cannot access a more competitive rate, and you are locked into whatever terms your current bank offers until the market recovers, if it recovers in your corridor. Run the numbers under those conditions. If the investment only works when you assume price growth, and the data is showing price stagnation or decline in your postcode, The asset is not working for you, it is working against you. Here is what the data told us today. Cotality's Pain and Gain report shows nearly 1 in 10 unit resales across Australia are selling at a loss, and Sydney's inner city corridors are at the centre of that bleeding. Roy Morgan data reveals 1.423 million Australians are at risk of mortgage stress, 616,000 more than when the rate hikes began. And the hidden costs, strata fees rising up to 40% in a single year, special levies reaching 6 figures per apartment are destroying whatever equity remains for owners who are already underwater. The unit was supposed to be the entry point. For too many Sydney-siders, it became the trap. Subscribe to Sydney Housing Collapse new analysis every week. No agents, no spin, just the data.